Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Metaplanet Madness Episode 2. I am one of your co-hosts. My name is Peter Duan. I also go by the Twitter handle BTC Bullrider. And together with my other co-host, ClimbThatLadder. Climb, how are you doing, bud?
I'm fantastic.
Man, episode 1 really took us, by surprise, right? The first very episode, if you were to look, I think I looked earlier today, it had 63,000 views on the first episode. What's your thoughts on that, bud?
It's about 10x what I expected, which hopefully is a sign for Metaplanet. So
I love that. I love that. Okay, well, everybody, we do have a presentation that we want to share with you. So bear with me as I pull that up. Okay, perfect. So Climb, can you confirm that you can see my screen?
yep, good to go.
Okay, perfect. All right, guys. So and gals, episode 2. What are we going to talk about today? Okay, primarily it's going to be centered around the recently dropped Q1 2025 earnings review. But before we jump into that, just some housekeeping notes. These housekeeping notes are mostly going to be standard going forward, but this is nevertheless important. Number one, this is never financial advice. It's just two friends, two fellow Bitcoiners, two fellow finance nerds just talking about one particular investment, and that is Metaplanet. This ties in well with being a Bitcoiner, which is don't trust, verify. Everything that we say is factual, but at the end of the day, it is up to you to double check for yourself. Number 3, this is a live event that we are hosting on a weekly basis. Every single Metaplanet Madness will occur on Saturday at noon Pacific, unless otherwise stated, and it will be redistributed on YouTube. The YouTube channel is Bull Standard, and we are going to go live with that in the next day or two, so please stay posted. And number 4, the whole reason why we want to do live spaces is that we want to interact with you as a crowd. So if you want and have questions, please go ahead and ask them in the chat, and we will try to answer them most likely at the end of the presentation. And finally, we appreciate each and every one of you, and we know that especially on the weekend, time is precious. So first of all, thank you for being with us. But if you do find a lot of value in what Climb and I do, the way you can return the favor is by liking our content and retweeting this live video so that fellow Metaplanet shareholders can benefit as well. Okay. So let's go into the agenda of today. What are the 4 areas that we want to talk about? The first area is, what does it mean to start a movement? And what I'm trying to allude to is that every movement needs actually a first follower, and that a first follower is actually a leader in his or her own right. And I'll explain why that is important when it comes to Bitcoin treasury companies. Number 2 is, being in the space for a little bit now, I observed that in order for a Bitcoin treasury company to have success, you need not only the quantitative side, which is obviously the Bitcoin execution, but also the qualitative side, which you and I, as being part of the retail community, is an integral part in the success of what makes a successful Bitcoin treasury company. Part 3 is the meat and potatoes of this, which, the star of the show is ClimbThatLadder and his analysis. He's not only going to run through his thoughts on the Q1 2025 earnings, which, by the way, was fantastic, but also he has done a lot of research and he has turned them into proprietary models and charts where I think you and I will find a lot of value. And finally, as I said, in order for a Bitcoin treasury company to be successful, we are nothing without our community. And so we've noticed people who are creating fan art and doing amazing things around the community, and we want to recognize that effort. So without further ado, I want to first talk about what it means to start a movement. So this video now is about 15 years old. This was one of the first viral TED Talk videos that I've ever seen. And right before this call, I tried to figure out a way to actually play this short video, but the audio didn't work. So bear with me as I kind of explain what it takes to start a movement. So this Derek guy, posted this video. It's about a 1-minute video of a guy who is dancing crazily at a music festival called Sasquatch, right? And at first, everybody just kind of looks at this person as this guy's crazy, right? But eventually, a guy started dancing, goes up to the first dancer and starts dancing with him. And shortly enough, the whole entire community jumps in and starts dancing with the first guy, right? So what I'm trying to show is that, most of us come here because we first followed strategy, right? And strategy has that 5-year head start, and in my opinion, has an insurmountable lead to acquire the most amount of Bitcoin. But then, as you know, there's a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies that are popping up. And one of the first is Metaplanet. And Metaplanet has done a lot of things that are even better than strategy that allows it to grow very fast, right? So this goes to point number 2, which is Bitcoin treasury companies' success is, as I mentioned, both quantitative and qualitative. The way that I see it is that there are 2 types of Bitcoin treasury companies. The first type, or I would call it maybe level 1 type, is just companies, mom and pop businesses that are simply converting their cash into Bitcoin. Okay. Now, obviously that's a great first step, but some of the downsides of that is that they can't tap into the capital markets to acquire more Bitcoin. And also there's no community/retail investor hype for them to play this, what I call level 2, which is leverage Bitcoin equities, right? So MSTR is leverage Bitcoin equity, Metaplanet, Semler, all these who are using the capital markets and the balance sheet to acquire more Bitcoin, right? So as I mentioned, if you are wanting to play the leverage Bitcoin equity game, not only do you need to have deep Bitcoin and capital markets knowledge, which makes up the quantitative side, but equally important, and a lot of Bitcoiners are not aware of this, is the strong community and retail base, which is the qualitative side. Let me explain why that is important, okay? This is what I call a Bitcoin treasury company flywheel. Okay, so in order to start even playing that level 2 game, that leveraged Bitcoin equity game, you have to first assemble a strong core Bitcoin treasury talent, right? These people have deep Bitcoin knowledge and deep capital markets knowledge. Then around this talent, you raise funds, okay? But right after you raise funds, you immediately need to focus on building a community. And the more crazed the community, the better. Why is that important? It's because that retail base is going to be your first investor, right? Wall Street is not catching up to this. They're at least a cycle behind. So your first source of capital has to be crazy Bitcoiners who believe that you deserve above 1 MNAV, right? So it's really important to be above 1 MNAV in the bull and especially the bear market, because that allows you to execute that capital markets game to do this accretive dilution game, right? Increasing Bitcoin per share. And that flywheel then attracts more Bitcoin talent, right? Which then allows you to create more different financial products. This is best seen through MSTR and the Strife and Strike offerings, right? Which raises more followings, which then drives more crazed retail fan base. This creates that flywheel effect. Okay, so in summary, I see a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies popping up, right? And you're already seeing that a lot of these Bitcoin treasury companies, because they don't focus on the qualitative side, which means they don't focus on the community building side, they're often trading just at or even below 1 MNAV, okay? And if you're doing that in a bull market, in a bear market, it's going to be a value trap. And that's my opinion, okay? So with that, I want to hand it over to ClimbThatLadder to talk more about the Q1 2025 earnings. Climb, you want to take it away?
Yeah. So I think most people know they were top performer globally in 2024. 64,000 shareholders. That's what Simon shared in Florida recently. I had a chart of that. I believe that was as of sometime in March. And so that's certainly, I would be willing to bet that's closer to 100,000 now. They're the only Bitcoin proxy in Japan, and we know they have around 6,800 Bitcoin right now. If I'm looking at the recent disclosures, just one quick note too before I forget. With the recent sales, they haven't announced yet, but they have to announce when they issue a certain number of shares, essentially. I think they might have enough money to hit about 8,000 Bitcoin next week. So we'll see. But I think with what they've already raised, they may essentially be at 8,000
Wow.
in potential. So
Wow.
yeah, I mean, my mid-July prediction of 10,000 is going to get totally crushed. I mean, it could even happen in May. Like, I'm not saying it'll happen in May. Now I would put my money on June, but it's going to be soon.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Um,
And one thing I really want to highlight is they've only executed this a little bit over a year ago, and since then they've increased the market cap by 100x. I mean, that's insane numbers, right?
yeah, I mean, I wish I had looked into all this more last year. Of course, there wasn't enough history for me to, if I could do it all over again, I probably wouldn't get in because I like seeing a strong history of growth. But
Me too.
this is a great time, I think. But and yeah, they have, let's see, the Bitcoin gain is obviously impressive.
But we can talk more about that in your models as well. Here's some of the other
Yeah.
highlights, right? You want to talk through this real quick?
Yes. So ranked number 11 globally, and I was actually, it might even be 9 now. I'm not sure, but somebody had it. I think on BitcoinTreasuries.net, it might be might show up as 9. I need to look into that. The Bitcoin yield so far uh, is 170%, and I can't remember what it was when we did our first episode, but I want to say it was like 125 or
Yeah,
124 or something like that.
yeah,
So I mean, that's 1 week ago. It's crazy how much they just keep going.
yeah,
Uh,
man.
so the Bitcoin gain almost 3,000, and that's not a number I typically talk about just because it's not one of the metrics that I tend to focus on, but that's still really, really cool. Locked in profit essentially from accretive dilution.
Yep, I love it. What
Yeah.
about
So
the one MNAV? Like, why do you think it traded at almost 10 MNAV, and why did it trend down to 3? And what do you think is a reasonable expectation going forward?
I expect it to oscillate like this. I know that there's some clips from a while back of Dylan talking about this. It might have been in the Tim Kotzman interview, but the a lot of people look at like volatility as vitality, but who cares if your stock's volatile if it's only as volatile as Bitcoin? So
Right,
what that really means is like you need MNAV to be volatile. You need MNAV to be volatile, but also you want it to be strong. And like the math for 3 MNAV is way, way better than the math at 2 MNAV. So, obviously 4 is better than 3 and so on. But like the dollars that have to buy the new shares, the dollar amount that have to buy the new shares relatively, it drops significantly, not just the dilution percentage required for the same yield.
right.
And that's something we can get into in the future for sure. But I expect this sort of MNAV roller coaster to kind of continue. Obviously less extreme as they become a larger company, a larger market cap company. But I wouldn't bet against 5 plus MNAV, in the future.
Got it. This is a very interesting metric, MNAV days to cover, and I believe this is an Adam Back metric. Could you kind of explain this and what it means?
Yeah, and it is really cool that it made it to the slide because I think Adam Back had the like months to MNAV cover. He tweeted about that concept like within the last 2 weeks. It was after I got into Metaplanet, um, and then I think Dylan responded. He's like, "Yeah, let's work on this," and then it made it to the slide. Like that's crazy fast. But it really shines. A lot of people think, well, if I'm buying a company that has a 3 MNAV, I'm overpaying. And so why not just buy one that has a 1 MNAV? Well, that's true for today. But the thing is that the yield potential is insane. Again, this isn't to knock Semler. I hope they climb away from the sort of 1 MNAV. I know they had a great Friday, so they might be like 1.3 or something like that now. But having something like a 3 MNAV allows you to produce. I mean, we're mid-May and they're at 170% yield year to date. I think MicroStrategy is in the teens, Semler's in the 20s, I believe. So it's like no contest as far as what you can do when you have sustainably high volume and strong MNAV, the combination.
But can
So
you
yeah, I mean,
can you explain to the public what it means of when MNAV days to cover? What does the days to cover really mean?
yeah, so there's probably different ways to kind of tweak it, but the general thing is to look at in the rearview mirror and say, okay, if you're trading at a 3 MNAV, you're trading at a 200% premium. How many days historically, in the last how many days did it take to get 200% premium? And then, look forward. Obviously, it's going to slow to some extent. So I think there might need to, be some curtailing there, like in the hard numbers in kind of predictions of the future, but it's still a pretty good way to it's a really good base to judge the future by. And then, take 2/3 of that or 3/4 of that or whatever. And that's probably a really good estimation. So yeah, just paying off that premium. So like if the premium, in 200 days magically dropped to 1, on that 200th day or whatever, then you're all balanced out. You haven't lost against Bitcoin, even with, it going from like a 3 to a 1, you've still essentially paid off that premium. And that's not at all to suggest it would go to a 1. That's just saying, even if it did, like you've still kept up with Bitcoin and everything. Like the premium has worked its way into the actual Bitcoin per share permanently.
That's
So
beautiful. That's beautifully said. And sorry, again, we're on episode 2, so we're working through other kinks. I just want you on your end to make sure that everything's streaming well because I can't see. But if you can give me the okay, then I'm happy to move to the next slide.
yeah, it's great.
Okay, great. Perfect. Well, I'll explain this. So Metaplanet measured its Sharpe ratio, okay? And its Sharpe ratio is 14, which is just something you do not see in the marketplace, right? Most hover around above 1. If it's at 2, as you see here, that's an actually extremely good investment. So let me explain what Sharpe ratio is, okay? Sharpe ratio has 3 variables to it. One is the return of portfolio or return of asset minus the risk-free rate divided by the standard deviation of the underlying asset or portfolio. Okay, so said another way, let's give example, right? If you have a stock that returned 10%, and let's just also assume that like the risk-free rate is 2, right? So a stock of 10 minus 2, that's 8, and it has a standard deviation of, let's say, 2 as well, right? So that Sharpe ratio would be 4, right? But if you take something that is, half of the return, so say going from 8 to 4 minus 2, but also the standard deviation and the volatility of that is also low, right? If so 4 minus 2, that equals 2 divided by a standard deviation of say 1, then you have a Sharpe ratio of 2, right? So in this case, you want to have something that has higher Sharpe ratio, which means for every unit of risk or volatility you're taking, you get rewarded with excess return. So said another way, for 1 unit of risk you're taking, you're getting 4 units of return for Metaplanet, which clearly smokes the competition. That's a very interesting metric in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it's things like that I used to consider boring, and honestly I need to dig into it more to understand it as intuitively as you do. But it's still like the idea is it's not just about retail getting into stocks like this. It's you have to be able to convince big money, whether it's VC type stuff or whatever, but convincing money and drawing attention to these plays. And one way to draw it to the older crowd, the more sophisticated crowd, is Sharpe ratio.
Correct.
Understanding things like this is something that now, like it was boring, and now it's becoming like really cool to dissect it and understand the benefits and who it really speaks to.
Correct. And so from that Sharpe ratio, right, you can look at this. You can effectively think of like the performance to be in the numerator and then the realized volatility to be the denominator. So when you take that division, that's how you get that ridiculous Sharpe ratio. And as you can see, like they're literally off the charts in regards to performance against the volatility, which is insane. What about this?
Yeah. volume has gone absolutely crazy on the US OTC market. It's funny because a lot of people, when it was like at $2.80 2 weeks ago or so, people were saying, oh, everyone's FOMOing in Metaplanet. It's like, okay, well, we're in the United States talking about a Japanese company. It might feel like FOMO because everyone's talking about it and you see volume on the US OTC market jumping up. And not to take away at all from this, like it's crazy. We had almost 20,000 shares trade. Maybe it was Monday, I guess. But that obviously that super tall one there was Monday. So, and it's stayed strong since, 5 to 7 million or so a day. The cool thing is that as much growth as this is, it's not like crazy FOMO. I think it's the next slide that you have that shows the orange there is what you just saw in the previous one. So the orange is the US OTC ticker MTPLF. And it's certainly building as a percentage of total volume, but the 3350 ticker, on the Japanese stock exchange, like that is still absolutely huge. So we're barely moving the needle as far as price. Tokyo is still totally the dominant force here, setting price a lot more than US just based on volume. But yeah, it's absolutely crazy, and I can't wait to see like what future months look like, and uplisting potential. There's endless potential here. It's just a matter of time, I think.
Yeah, it's just a matter of time. And then I also constantly see people asking questions in the community about like, oh, like, when's Robinhood going to list it? How do you buy it? So for me personally, I use Fidelity and I have to turn on the option to allow for OTC. And then also just to note that because it is a foreign stock, they do charge a 50% $50 transaction fee. And so when I first started, I can only buy $25,000 slugs and paying that $50 fee. But then as I was building conviction and building my position, I upped it to 30,000 and it worked. And so I presume that as the volume gets deeper, and especially if something like Robinhood adds it to the platform, it just adds more liquidity. And you'll see this kind of commission thing going down, if not diminishing over time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and it hasn't, we haven't needed much US interest for the stock, for MNAV to be high, for the stock to be the best performer in the world. And so this is just icing on the cake.
Yes,
all
sir.
the new investors.
Yes. And speaking of new investors, right, this is a beautiful chart of just showing like what is the growth in shareholders. I mean, this is primarily retail, right? I mean, institutions are barely getting their heads wrapped around Bitcoin, much less MSTR, and definitely much less Metaplanet. So all those who are present and listening on, again, this is not financial advice, but you are very, very, very early on into the Metaplanet growth story. All right, this is a very interesting chart, and this is where we move away from the Q1 earnings into your analysis. So can you walk us through what you're showing us here?
Yeah, so there's a series of charts that we're about to go through that tie together into as handicapped of a model as I know how to fairly create. So I have a bull base and bear case. You don't see much difference in the dilution numbers, just the way the math worked. But like April, I think they diluted their shares 10%, but they were limited to 10% that month. I don't believe they are this month. I believe that limit comes into play with price relative to when the new share announcement it kind of happens, something like that. But so this chart just shows how I've kind of handicapped my model to be as conservative as possible by saying every month is going to be less percentage of shares, that are diluted, that are sold to the market. And I mean, like, I played around with different numbers. So here's the first handicap. It may stay a lot stronger. It might stay around 10% for a few months, which gives it a crazy boost. So this is just a very, very conservative take on what I think they can do without too much concern, given the volume and the high MNAV they have to work with.
So for those who are just listening and not being able to watch on the screen, it shows that in month one, and it's around, call it even in the bull case, hovering just above 10% monthly share dilution and slowly curving down to about, 2.5%. In the next 24 months. So let me ask, how did you start with that roughly 10% monthly dilution number? Because I feel like that is kind of the linchpin on this compounding effect going forward.
So I'm going through the historic stuff because I want a graph of past and I want to stitch it together with my predictions so you can really see like here's where we're coming from and where I think, is a safe bet on where we're going. Just my, personal feelings. But April, like I said, they hit exactly, I believe it was exactly 10% share dilution. And, to me, that implies they wanted to do more. And I'm pretty sure they're able to do more now. So that was just kind of like what I consider to be a safe number to go with, given the volume and everything that they have to work with. Even if they dilute 10%, I think the stock could still climb each month, up to a certain point where the volume has to keep up with the market cap and all that, of course. So I just figured 10 is a decent place given history of how much they've been able to do successfully without a problem, without crushing MNAV too much. And then just go down from there just to handicap it further.
I love it. What about this chart? And again, for those who are just listening in, I'm going to read the title of the chart. It says Metaplanet's projected increase in share count as of May 14th, 2025.
So this is just for people who wonder how much that previous chart expands the share count, because it's a little, it's kind of hard to think about that compounding, right? So it turns into something that's almost linear increase, almost the same amount of shares, despite the percentage, decreasing as it gets larger. But given the bull base and bear there, I've kind of marked stuff at December 31st this year. So between 71 and 85% new shares compared to today, essentially, is kind of what I expect to be issued. So less than a doubling of the share count by the end of the year. And then looking 24 months out, it's between 186 and 259. So, a 2.8 to 3.6 fold, on what it is today, which I think's pretty safe for them to do. And so pairing the previous chart and this one, it really kind of helps you understand how much dilution is that really, and what does that look like over time. So the rate slows, the shares would probably stay about flat, but it would be a much smaller percentage of float every single month. So
Got it. Yeah, these two charts are beautiful together. So the third chart, and again, I'm reading the title, is Metaplanet's projected MNAV handicap for models starting as of May 14th, 2025. So walk us through this real quick.
yeah, and it's kind of funny. So I made these I guess that was Wednesday or Thursday, and I think the MNAV was like 3.27. So I'm like, okay, well that's just going to be the starting point because that's where history, that's where we are. That's the present. Well, I think right now it's like MNAV is like 3.36. So we've already been more bullish than my chart suggested that we would be anytime in the next 24 months. That's just a small note, but it's kind of funny. So this is not where I think, don't misunderstand. This is, for the viewers, this is not where I think the bull base and bear cases actually are. This is a very handicapped model of, even in the bull case, saying that we start at, 3.27 MNAV and then go down a little bit every single day until 24 months from now, we're at a 3, or in the base case down to a 2.5, in the bear case all the way down to a 2. And for reference, that would put it below where strategy is. I think strategy is maybe at 2.1 or something like that. So this is just an extreme handicap, as well as the diminishing dilution, in order to make this as sort of what I consider to be conservative and safe of a model as I possibly could, because I don't want to come across as having these just crazy bullish, outlandish numbers that, even if they come true, they just seem absolutely ridiculous. So I'd much rather go as safely as possible for my own benefit and if I'm sharing it with other people.
Yeah, I love that. And yeah, for those listeners and viewers, remember the chart that we've seen a couple of slides ago, where at one point At the peak, Metaplanet's MNAV is 9.5, right? So I can confirm that this is really, really conservative MNAV projections. His bull case is 3 MNAV and his bear case is 2 MNAV. So yeah, I mean, stepping back, this is why I teamed up with Climb, because I observed him during the last cycle, and he was always a very conservative, level-headed investor. So again, I really appreciate his conservatism. Now, let's move on to this next slide, which is Bitcoin holdings on a log chart. This is a beautiful slide. Could you kind of walk people through what this means?
Yes, I thought it would be neat to stitch together, and so I'm going to start doing this with different charts going forward, to stitch together the historic graph, up to present. So April 23rd, 2024, I believe, was the first day that they bought Bitcoin with their treasury, and I think they had just under 100. It was like 97 point something Bitcoin, and then now they have 60, almost 6,800. And so that's where that line is, essentially breaking the past and the future. And you can also just see, because of how smooth the future is, just with the numbers that I'm with the model that I'm working with, kind of keeping it smooth there. The cool thing is, I thought that these were crazy numbers a couple of weeks ago, until I just kept running the numbers, kept trying to sort of cap my model and keep it as conservative as possible. And again, I'm not taking like any sort of like debt that they do to pull the Bitcoin acquisition machine forward. I'm not taking any of that into account. I'm pretending that the only thing they can do is moving strike warrants, which is their version of the ATM. It's very similar. So I've marked here that the last day of 2025, I predict that they'll have between 34,000 and almost 50,000 Bitcoin. So I would like, to me, there's a 50-50 chance that they land inside that window, just the way the log growth works. And if they land outside of it, I would bet on it being higher than that. So that's the end of the year. And then the end of 24 months, that expands to, and again, this, so this is with MNAV dropping, this is with dilution dropping every month as a percentage. And so in 2 years, that puts this model, the bear case being 121,000 Bitcoin, the bull case being 380,000 Bitcoin. So I know people are going to say, what if we have a bear market? And I think about stuff like that too. And I think that I've curtailed this model so much that I expect things like MNAV to do better than my model. So that would sort of offset a bear market. But also, I mean, they can essentially, especially with their low debt, if they wanted to hibernate during a bear market, they could. If MNAV goes down to 1 for all these companies for some reason during the bear market and then expands again, like, they don't have to. I mean, they can do however they want, but like, if they want to just kind of put a pause, it's kind of counterintuitive, because Bitcoin would be cheaper. So people might think, well, why not buy? But if you don't have if you want to preserve the yield potential of future growth, then you would actually want to only, dilute when MNAV's high. And so if there's just a bear market or something that's hurting everyone for 6 to 18 months, whatever it is, temporary thing or sort of longer term thing, then if they wanted to just wait it out, like, what's stopping them? I mean, that's like, I'm not saying that they should or will do that, but like, that's just my basic answer now, because it seems like that would work, is just to wait it out.
Yep. And one other thing that I really enjoy about this chart is that you compare Metaplanet's logarithmic growth against that of MSTR, right? MSTR's slope on this is much, much lower than Metaplanet's. And that makes sense, right? Because they're the 800-pound gorilla. And they have already a $100+ billion market cap, while the market cap of Metaplanet is around 2 billion USD. So that's why you and I are so giga bullish, and we believe that while MSTR is the undisputed king of total Bitcoin holdings, we believe that Metaplanet is the much faster jockey, or the horse in the race. Okay, what about this?
Yeah, so Metaplanet's projected multiplication of the current Bitcoin per share. So kind of given all the previous graphs, you end up with saying, okay, and this also ties back to the days or months to MNAV cover idea. So, if you're buying a stock that's trading at a 3 MNAV, how long until they can, triple their Bitcoin per share, essentially, to sort of work that premium off to where, anything beyond that is bonus points for you, even if they somehow drop to 1 MNAV, essentially. It's just, the way to balance that sort of premium out, essentially, is to think about the future yield. So you look at this, and here's my estimates, again, based on all the other charts. The last day of this year, from today, I would expect a 2.94 to a 3.85 multiplication of their current Bitcoin per share. So yeah, that's where it's at. And then 2 years, I have it between 6 and 15 for the bear to bull case there. And again, if they get outside of bounds on what I'm predicting, I would personally expect it to be to the upside.
Right. Yeah. So, said another way, right? It's like assuming using the base case of roughly 10, projected multiple on Bitcoin per share of 2 years from now, simply multiply the current share by 10, but then also multiply it by what you think, the Bitcoin is going to grow to between now and 2 years. And so this is why you can get these pretty kind of outlandish stock price projections for Metaplanet in just only the next 2 years alone. It could easily be a 10 bagger just on Bitcoin per share, much less the growth in Bitcoin underlining it. I love this. And again, this next chart, again, for those who are listening, we're looking at Bitcoin price projections for stock price model. And this really shows how consistent you are at being conservative, right? Because you are also projecting on the bear case that Bitcoin is going from its roughly $100,000 value to down to 85,000 2 years from now, while on the bull case, it goes from 100,000 to 250,000 in the next 2 years. So besides that, I guess, am I missing anything, or you want to talk something else about this slide?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically it. And then then I added the end of 2025 numbers because, me saying the bull case is going to 250K in 2 years, I think that's pretty conservative for a bull case for sure. And then that also means only assuming like 136, 137,000 at the end of this year. And us, dropping some for the bear case and staying about flat for the base case.
Yeah, beautiful. So then we kind of tie those together, right? So we're using, the MNAV multiples with bull, base, and bear case price on Bitcoin, and then we can project out its future stock price. So can you walk us through this?
Yeah, and this will be something that I try to keep up with. It looks like I messed up that line on past and future. That's just off by a tiny bit, but you can see the past price action, the 3 future potential projections there, and that puts. I mean, right now it's trading at a little over $4. My prediction is between $10 and $21 by the end of this year, and I wouldn't be surprised if we blow that out of the water. 25 to 35 is sort of more of like a personal, like, if I actually had to bet, which I mean, I guess I am because I'm an investor, so I'm putting money on it. But like if I had to bet on just the end of year price, right? My gut says more like 25 to 35, but my model to be as restrictive as possible. And again, there's no guarantees, but my model is saying with these restrictions I've placed on it, $10 to $21 end of this year. And then even with Bitcoin and MNAV dropping, and even looking at the bear case, 2 years from now, it goes to over $13 a share, which is almost 3 times, essentially 3 times where it is right now. And the bull case is like 10 times that. It's 143. Just by tweaking a few of the variables in the positive favor, it's 10 times what the bear case is at $143 in 2 years. And yeah, that's with Bitcoin only going to 250 and MNAV dropping in even the bull case here, and dilution dropping, every single month. So I
Ridiculous.
was pretty surprised. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect from kind of this 2 year thing until I ran the numbers. Like I had everything else And until I saw it, I was like, okay, well, that's pretty convincing to me.
Yeah, I love this chart. I mean, this is such a sexy chart, and how it kind of ties in with the two previous um, charts. I mean, it was beautiful. So I think that's the end of at least the analysis part of where we think. Well, we first took a snapshot of the Q1 results. They were really, really surprisingly great. And then also we're now projecting forward a little bit over the next 2 years. Many more analysis to come, but I want to wrap this up by giving the community a shout out. And as some of you guys who are, I've already seen, irresponsibly long, Metaplanet and all this, if you guys want this community to grow, and we really do need every single one of you to participate, I do recommend putting the Metaplanet Madness in your profile, and I'll walk you very quickly on how you can do that. So, and I'm on premium. I don't know if this works on the free one, but if you're on the premium side, you should be able to see a communities tab on the left-hand side of the bar. Then you click into Metaplanet Madness as step 2. Then you go to the About section. Then you click that star-looking logo. And then you click in Spotlight Community on your profile. I mean, if you guys are as gigabullish as we are on Metaplanet Madness, or just Metaplanet, we benefit from this network effect of having everybody adding this to your profile. So finally, we want to give some shout outs to the individual people within the community. I noticed this gentleman, and this is a very long username, so I can't pronounce it, but he creates amazing AI art. Please go to his YouTube, follow him. He created a Metaplanet music video. I mean, it's like this quality throughout. And matter of fact, I heard this gentleman or gal actually won the fan competition at the Metaplanet annual shareholder meeting. I mean, literally, it's mind blowing how good the quality is and the music as well. And yeah, please follow this person because he's constantly putting out amazing AI art. And as I said, on the qualitative side of being a Bitcoin treasury company, we absolutely need the community engagement. And I think fan art is just the beginning of a very bullish trend. Shifting gears, we have another guy by the name of Chad Ship. He owns a bunch of billboards. He has 18 billboards, right, across Texas, Arkansas, Louisiana, 7 million impressions a month. I think the numbers that he ran was like $30,000 a month worth of advertisement that he's just doing for free because he's so giga bullish on Metaplanet. So big shout out to Chad Ship. And then finally, you and I know that this Adam Livingston kid is just a juggernaut for creating content. He created an amazing Metaplanet breakdown on the US side. Many of you guys may not be aware that Metaplanet has launched and secretly is building a Metaplanet US division based out in Miami. They're looking to raise 250 million. And of course, once they do, they're going to fully port it into Bitcoin. So as the name says, right, Metaplanet, I believe this is just the beginning of a 24/7, Bitcoin buying spree, and we'll be very curious to see what happens in the near future. So that's it, guys. That is all we have on the slide side. I do want to take a look into the community chat. If you do have questions, please let me know so that Climb and I can answer. But Climb, is there any questions that I can that you want to address or that you want to add to this?
Man, yeah, I mean, we could talk for hours. Like what you bring up about the attention that stocks, especially when they're literally competing for investors every day, and like everyone's seen all the new tickers. I mean, this is what they're doing, and I wish them well. Obviously, I'm not investing in them. I'm only in Metaplanet and cash. That's it, and that's where I plan to stay. But the competition is fierce, and there's many ways that these companies can win. And if they don't have volume, if nobody cares about them, then their initial growth stage, accretive dilution being just a huge part of that, really gets dampened. And so, us talking about this not only, brings a bunch of people that we know in the community, a bunch of friends that we have into this potential, But it also lost my train of thought there. Sorry.
Yeah,
I
no
saw
worries, bud.
Adam's post and yeah.
No,
But yeah, I mean, it's exciting. Like the potential here is insane, and it's going to keep going. And you know, like I said before, Japan didn't need our help on keeping MNAV and volume strong. We're just adding to it, you know. So we're joining them on the trade, and really excited about it.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. I think just like how MNAV is a strategic advantage, having a rabid retail fan base is also a strategic moat as well. You already see that through True North, right, on the MSTR side, but everybody here is building actively that retail side with Metaplanet. And this is great during the bull market, but really we need each other in the bear market to sustain ourselves, to keep ourselves above one MNAV so that we can acquire cheap sats during the bear market. But anyways, Climb, do you want to tease potentially some other analysis that you're working on so that those who are excited for Metaplanet Madness episode 3 can tune in?
Yeah, I think the months to MNAV cover is something really worth exploring. But even aside from, because that's a fairly basic concept, you know, you can like in 30 seconds or a minute, you can be like, oh, okay, I get it, you know, just paying off the premium with the yield, but you know, the time it takes to do that. But the thing that still is a struggle, you know, and I look at this stuff all the time now, and it's still a struggle for me, is the effect of oscillating MNAV on potential, and then also how much better like a 3M nav is than a 2, especially when you iterate multiple dilutions. Like don't just do the math for one single dilution event, but when you iterate multiple dilutions, it's a pretty exponential sort of response. And so I would love to go through that, you know, probably in the next episode.
Perfect, guys. Well, thank you to all 5,103 live participants. Again, Climb and I are very, very deeply humbled. Please, if you guys like this content, please follow Climb and I. We are looking to actively add to this community on a daily basis. And your liking and sharing and retweeting this is your best way to thank us for our time and effort. Again, everybody, we appreciate each and every one of you. We are doing a live spaces like this on a weekly basis at Saturday at noon Pacific. We look forward to having you on the next one. Thank you. Bye.